Sup, dorks? Welcome to King Dungeon Master. This is going to be the first part of a series. For the next little while, this channel is going to be a dive into Wizards of the Coast's publication, the Dungeon Master's Guide. The context for all of this, I'll be using my own campaigns as examples, because what this is going to be is almost a page-by-page, blow-by-blow of my commentary on like how I do what's in the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's theory, and there's practice, and there's a big old Venn diagram where a massive amount of overlap. But I have some things to say that I think might help my fellow DMs out there, emerging DMs, experienced DMs. Let's just have a conversation here. Page 5, if you're following along, the Dungeon Master's Guide opens up with what Dungeon Masters do, and there's some lovely. You can read that page for yourself. What I have to say about it is what it lists is actor, director, improviser, referee, storyteller, teacher, world builder. Now, I'm not saying that the authors of the Dungeon Master's Guide made a mistake there, but I might have approached things a little bit differently. That's a big list and an intimidating list, and it's hard enough to find Dungeon Masters these days because it's a lot of people want to play D&D, and there's a rarefied few who want to be the Dungeon Master because it is a tough job. It's not easy, but it is a desirable difficulty that results in just, for those of us who enjoy doing it, man, it is the stuff of life. So what I'll say is that if you are privileged to have a generous and helpful group who aren't overly antagonistic or less than optimally agreeable, really what it comes down to is I think you're the world builder and the storyteller. And everything else flows naturally from there. So, for example, the actor, if you're doing a little bit of NPC work, a little bit of role play, yeah, you're an actor. Improviser, obviously, the players are constantly going to come up with things that you didn't anticipate, and therefore you need to improv at the table something that accommodates their crazy requests. So, they're referee, hopefully not. Like I said, you deserve better than to play D&D with people who are just kind of being dicks at the table. Classic complaints being, well, that's what my character would do if they're just being difficult. You're all there to have fun. You're all there to tell a story. You're all there to play a game. Everybody chill. There is no, I don't know what the stakes are exactly. There's no winning. It's just the actual goal is everybody having fun and collaboratively telling a kick-ass story starring the characters that your players want to play. So hopefully not too much refereeing. But world building and storytelling, those are the fun things after all. Like why wouldn't primarily you want your job to be those things? At least that's how I do it. The DM tips that I think are on the facing page are all true and invaluable. There's a whole page there about D&D being a shared story, not a competition, obviously. That the DM, you need to be both fair and flexible. The rules of D&D have been thoroughly play tested, and it is a very well balanced game. So if you follow the stats and suggestions that are in the book, things will kind of make sense. But at the same time, it's incredibly complex, and I don't mean difficult to learn. I mean complex in that the interactions, of course, you can do anything at the table, so the interactions are just the infinite permutations of everything that's possible here. So the Dungeon Master does need to just make judgment call after judgment call of what's possible, what would happen, what kind of damage is taken. Can you do this? You can certainly try, and you'll be all good. But also communicative and fallible. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. So just make sure that there's lots of communication at the table. Slow down. D&D sessions are notoriously long, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. I'm going to add to that in saying, and this has been a fault of mine, that you can slow down. You can ask more questions. Like don't think that that's going to slow the momentum of your story. It's going to add depth and meaning to your story, which is well worth the trade-off. And besides, as far as pacing goes, we'll talk about time later, but as far as pacing goes, you can sit and you can have a conversation with your players, like at the table in game, about, okay, well, wouldn't it make sense if this patron gave us the money for the, you can talk things out, and then and this is really the fun part for me, it's like solving a little story puzzle where you can say, all right, so the result of this is you've spent 3 days working for so-and-so, this much is in your coin purses, and blah, blah, blah. And there's a little bit of fallout from here, which you can dilate the timeline a little bit. And so it makes the story feels like it has some air in it, like some real, like, there's a funny thing that happens with campaigns where, if you don't pay attention to, your timeline and time dilations, then you can get your characters to level 20 and you realize that only like 2 weeks of game time have passed. So we'll talk more about time later, but do be flexible and fallible. You will make mistakes. I've made some doozies, but you just roll it into the story and just claim that it is a rule of cool, or I really blew what dispel magic meant, and I had it dispel magic in an area of influence instead of a single target, so it unmasked this. There was this whole. This will sound weird. I mean, it's D&D, right? A whole office full of angelic beings, or basically the bureaucratic center of a particular celestial deity that's in this world, only a bit infiltrated by demons. And so this one character casts Dispel Magic, meaning to target this one character to see, this NPC, to see if they could reveal something about them. And I just, because it was going to be awesome, it was just this moment where like half of these figures in this kind of desk farm office area suddenly go from the angelic form that they were in a moment ago into these like demonic beings, and it was an incredible combat session that we opened the next session with. So it was a massive mistake, but it turned into a really kick-ass dramatic moment that led to a hot start on the next session. It was nothing but upside. The last thing we'll talk about today is pages 6 and 7. And that's the things you need. Now, it's got, like I said, 2 facing pages, and it is, like, they keep it pretty minimal, which I applaud, because what it comes down to is 3 core books and some character sheets and pencils and a set of dice. And that's it. Now, is it more convenient for everybody to have their own set of dice? Sure. Character sheets, pencils, that's all fine. Multiple copies of the player's handbook are probably a good idea. Each player might, want to have one of those. But if you're just, just the starter kit, if you're, like, literally there is a starter kit, but if you're just, getting into this, there is an incredibly low barrier of entry, especially when you consider just from that little pile. And here's my entire pile. This is pretty much everything. You can even see the notebooks in there, but that's my whole stash. That's everything. And so low barrier of entry, especially when you consider just the near infinite amount of meaningful and fun story that you can mine out of that. Like I said, just with the 3 core books. Now, maybe you want to build out into, get more books, Xanathars and source books and world building, material and all that. I mean, it's all great. It's all good, inspiration and like I said, thoroughly play tested. So you get lots of like reliable stats. And I think what I'll end with today is, yes, keep it cheap and cheerful. You don't need much. 3 core books, or just the starter kit that's got an adventure and some stripped down rules in it, so you can get your feet wet. $25 and everybody can play. They've got pre-made characters. But listen, and this is just me. I know there's a lot of digital tools, virtual tabletops and D&D Beyond that people really like. They like playing with their, having their iPad in front of them. Lots of people do it. I'm going to recommend a 0 screen table. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be 0 screen. For the dungeon masters, I guess you can't tell your players what to do if they really want to use some combination of character sheet and tablet or whatever. They've got their system, and I respect that. I prefer, and I've done it both ways. My players, if any of you are watching this, and you shouldn't be, but if my players are watching this, they know I have an iPad in front of me. I'm thinking of getting rid of that. I've gotten it down, down, down. The only screen I think I'll have, in my setup is I run playlists from my phone. So I've taken a bunch of soundtracks from video games and movies I like and things and chopped them up into playlists. So we've got a battle playlist and caution and relax and towns and taverns. The honest advice is minimal screen. Like there is just something different about processing via paper versus a screen. I don't know. It's hard to describe. I've got a whole other channel devoted to a lot of this kind of stuff. Let's just leave it at that for now. Yeah, minimal screens. Just take a break from your phone for a little while and be at the table with your friends, with your character sheet and a physical set of dice and a book, and you will be astonished, at the adventures you can have with only that. That's it for today. There's going to be another one soon. We've only made it to page 7, I think, of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Lots more to say on our next episode. So hope to see you at the table. Later.